In the UK, millions of people are taken to the streets. I'm talking about the Unite the Kingdom protest, which may not be as simple as you think. Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, Elliot Anon, and today we'll be discussing the Unite the Kingdom protest in the UK. I'm going to go over what that is right now. If you already know, skip forward to the next timestamp. Let's get into it. There is a massive protest happening in the UK right now, known as the Unite the Kingdom protest. People are taking to the streets because they believe the UK is losing its culture, its identity, and its sovereignty through mass immigration. Now, is this protest a good thing? Overall, yes, I think it is a good thing, but there are also motivation issues that need to be talked about, especially because Tommy Robinson, one of the major figures connected to the event, is extremely pro-Israel, and there are Israeli flags being waved in the crowd. So the question is, can the protest still represent something positive, even if some of the people behind it have questionable motives? For those of you who do not know, there is a huge protest taking place in the UK. I believe there are millions of people taking part, or at least a massive number of people, where they are taken to the streets to express their grievances with the current immigration problem in the UK. A lot of frustration is focused specifically on Muslim immigration. You see people chanting things like Allah, who is Allah, and things like that, because they believe the UK is being changed into something it never was. Now, is this a good thing? Yes, I think it's a good thing overall. Obviously, there are motivation issues. Tommy Robinson, who is one of the major organizers or faces connected to this event, is extremely pro-Israel. He is a Zionist, and you can see Israeli flags being waved in the crowd, so the motivation is a little iffy. Anytime you get anti-Muslim messaging coming from someone who is extremely pro-Israel, you have to question the motivation. It is not always pure. Sometimes it is less about protecting your own country and more about tying anti-Muslim immigration sentiment to support for Israel. However, even with that said, the immigration issue in the UK is still real. You can acknowledge that some of the motives are questionable while also acknowledging that the problem being protested is genuine. In the UK, there is a real concern that the country is losing its original culture and identity. The most common birth name in the UK is Muhammad. 5.7k boys born in 2026 have the name Muhammad in the UK. And for reference, the second most common name, Noah, had 4.1k boys born. And point is that people see this as symbolic. They look at this and say, this does not feel like the same country anymore. Why is that an issue? Because the UK has an identity. Europe has an identity. Britain once built one of the largest and most powerful empires in human history. Europe has produced some of the greatest advancements in modern civilization. Europe spread Christianity, built powerful nations, created these distinct cultures, and shaped the world. Europe was historically Christian European civilizations. The Britain, France, Spain, and other European empires were built by specific peoples with specific cultures, traditions, religions, and identities. What made these countries unique and good was not just the land, it was the people, the culture, the religion, the history, and the common identity. Britain should have British people. France should have French people. That is what makes these countries unique. That is what makes them different from anywhere else. When you take that away, you no longer have the same country. If the religion becomes different, the people become different, and the culture becomes different, then the country becomes different. What made Europe beautiful, in a sense, was the commonality of its people. You had people with a shared culture, shared values, shared religion, shared history, and shared identity. That common culture helped create technological advancements, strong nations, and civilizations that spread across the world. The point is that a people with a common identity, culture, religion, and history created some of the greatest achievements in human history. Now, seeing that identity be conquered or replaced over time, it is saddening. And it is especially sad when it is not even happening through war or conquering. It is happening through legality, bureaucracy, immigration policy, and governments that are allowing it to happen. It is not like the UK countries lost a war and got conquered by another army. It is more like people are entering the country legally and illegally, and the government is allowing the culture to change while the native population is told they are bad people for noticing it. That is why it is good to see United Kingdom patriots stepping up and saying enough is enough. The United Kingdom is historically a Christian European group of countries. It is not an Islamic country. What made the United Kingdom and Europe great was the fact that these countries had common cultures and common identities. That common culture drove advancement, order, and national unity. These protesters are saying they do not want that taken away anymore. They are saying that their country should not be transformed into something completely different. They are correctly saying we should not allow our country to be invaded, whether legally or illegally, or through government policy. If your government allows your borders and culture to be changed against the will of the people, are you really a sovereign country? No, without the capability of your government to enforce your borders, you are not a sovereign country. The sad part is that these governments can defend their borders. They are choosing not to. A major reason European governments refuse to act is because they're afraid of being called racist. This is what really annoys me. People are too afraid to stand up for their culture, their borders, and what made their civilization great because they don't want to be called racist. Yes, genuine racism is immoral and wrong. Genuine hatred towards people because of race is wrong. But a lot of the time, people use the word racist to shut down any defense of national culture, borders, or demographic identity. People will call Donald Trump racist for wanting illegal immigrants removed from America. Meanwhile, their countries are being changed right in front of them. If your culture is being replaced and your government can stop it but chooses not to, then sitting around calling everyone racist instead of fixing your country is pathetic. A lot of people in Europe have this mindset, and I think it's more common than people realize. Before this protest, I honestly thought the amount of patriots in Europe was exaggerated. But after seeing this protest, it makes me happy because it shows that millions of people might actually understand what is happening is wrong and not just racist. These people are taking to the streets and admitting that without one common culture and one common peoples, you do not have the same country you had in the past. They are saying they do not want to be replaced. They are saying they want their country to remain theirs. They are saying that Muhammad should not actually be the most common birth name in the UK. They're also pointing to crime concerns. I need to be careful with how this is said on YouTube, but the argument people make is that some immigrant communities are overrepresented in certain violent and sexual crimes. I have to say it like that, YouTube. That is something people should not be ignoring. The people of the UK are asking, why should we be okay with a new culture replacing the old culture after our ancestors built this country from the ground up? They created a country and a culture that they like. Now they're being told they have to let it be replaced or else they're racist. That is where the issue is. Racism is not worse than being conquered. If people are so afraid of being called racist that they allow their culture to disappear, their country to be transformed, and their people to lose political power, then that is weakness and they do not love their people enough. Again, genuine hatred is immoral, but defending your culture is not the same thing as hatred. People also confuse racism with prejudice. The Google-style definition of racism often includes prejudice, but prejudice is not always automatically immoral. For example, if you are in a bad neighborhood at night and someone poorly dressed, acting strangely, asks you for something, you'll be cautious. That is prejudgment, that is prejudice in the literal sense. But it is also a safety calculation. The issue is not that you notice patterns or make safety judgments. The issue is whether you treat people with hatred, whether you deny them the ability to prove your prejudice wrong, or whether you treat them without basic respect. So the idea that every form of prejudice or self-protection is equivalent to hateful racism, it's wrong. The problem is that people have been trained to think being called racist is one of the worst things imaginable, so they would rather let their country be transformed than risk being called that word. That is weak. It is nice to see Europeans who are not afraid to talk about these things. It is nice to see people who are not afraid to be called racist when they believe their entire culture is slowly being erased. I think this protest is rooted more in love than hatred. Love for their culture, love for what their ancestors built, love for their religion, love for their shared traditions, and love for their country. They like having a common culture, they like their sports, their traditions, their history, their way of life. That does not make them extremists. I see a lot of people labeling these protesters as far-right extremists, and I think that is extremely hyperbolic. They are not extremists because they love their culture, because they want the UK to remain the UK. To the contrary, if they love something and because they love it, they think it's worth fighting for. So in that sense, I'm a little white-pilled by this. I'm happy to see people actually stand up for something instead of being total cowards and letting their country and culture disappear because they are afraid of being called racist. Unlike the United States, the reason the protest is targeting Muslim immigration specifically is because the UK actually does have a major Muslim immigration issue. In America, when we see people focus heavily on Islam, we often ask, what is the ulterior motive? Because America does not have the same scale of Muslim immigration that the UK does. In America, the percentage of Muslims are less than 1%, whereas in the UK it is 6%. The point is that the UK In the UK, this is a much bigger issue. It is not just a way to create division or distract people like it is in the US. It is actually a genuine concern. So if you are primarily into US politics like I am, you have to understand that Islam may not be as big of an issue in America as some people make it out to be, but it is a real issue in the UK. That is the important distinction. Now, the pro-Israel stuff is a real problem. Tommy Robinson is extremely pro-Israel, and you can see Israeli flags being waved in the crowd. So these protests are not perfect, to say the least, but I think some people get too stuck on that. They see Israeli flags and immediately say, this is obviously Zionist propaganda. And maybe there is some truth to that. Maybe some of the organizing motives are connected to that. Maybe some people are trying to tie anti-Muslim immigration sentiment to support for Israel, but I still think the overall message has merit in this scenario. Muslim immigration in the UK is a separate issue from Israel. You can oppose Muslim immigration into the UK without being pro-Israel. These two things do not have to be intertwined. That is important to say. And it is especially important when you think about why so many Muslims are migrating to Europe in the first place. Maybe, just maybe, it has something to do with their homelands being destabilized or promised to another group of people. So in that sense, it is a little funny. But overall, I still think this protest is positive because it shows the people standing up for nationalism. People should acknowledge two things at the same time. First, Muslim immigration in the UK is a genuine issue, and it is good to see people talking about it. Second, you do not have to support Israel to want your people to keep their culture and country. Those two things can and should be separated. I think that the main point people need to understand, you cannot just say the entire protest is a Zionist psyop, dismiss the real issue, but you also cannot pretend the Israeli flags and pro-Israel organizers are irrelevant. They matter, they complicate things, but they do not erase the validity of the core issue. Another thing I want to talk about is the way the media is framing this protest. Some people say this is an organized Zionist propaganda event to cause division. But at the same time, the media is also against the protest. You can see the media framing the protesters as extremists. You see them saying there were only around 50,000 people there. But when you look at overhead videos, the protest looks absolutely massive. Blocks and blocks are filled, shoulder to shoulder. It seems a lot bigger than 50K. So it does seem like the media is against the protest. That does not automatically mean the protest is good. But in this case, I think you can acknowledge the nationalistic benefits of it. I say this often in my videos, what something symbolizes is very important. The protest symbolizes nationalism, love for their culture, love for their country, and people taking back what they believe is theirs. That is a good thing. You do not have to focus on every single flaw, every Israeli flag, or every opinion Tommy Robinson has. You can look at what the event symbolizes for the people. And what it symbolizes is that people are tired of being conquered culturally and demographically, while being told they are bad people for noticing. Now, symbolizing something while actually having different motivations can be dangerous, as we see in the United States with figures like Trump and J.D. Vance. However, for this specific scenario, I think symbolism is more important. I'll get more into this later. That is why I think the protest is a white pill overall. Now here's the black pill. It might not even matter. Millions of people can go into the streets and say, we do not want to be replaced, we want to keep our culture, and nothing may happen. They might continue being replaced anyway. That is the depressing part. It may be over for Europe. There may be nothing that can be done to save it, unless people actually vote in leaders who are willing to take real action. The problem is that they may vote in people who talk the right way, use the right symbols, and say the right things, but then never actually do what needs to be done. This is where the United States becomes relevant. In the United States, we voted in Donald Trump. He represents nationalism, immigration restriction, pro-American culture, and taking the country back. We made a statement similar to this protest. We voted for someone who symbolizes standing up for the people. And what happened? We got nowhere near what we were promised. Trump did close the border, but we did not get mass deportations like we were promised. Legal immigration is still happening. Millions of people who came in under Biden are not going to be removed. We are still moving backwards. So the concern is that the UK could make the same mistake. They might vote in someone who talks like a nationalist, but does not actually act like one. Someone who says the right things, waves the right symbols, and then supports unpopular foreign policy, or refuses to take real action on immigration. That is what happened with Trump, and this is the real concern with only looking at symbolism. Symbolism matters, but symbolism is not enough. The United Kingdom protest is good because it shows that a lot of people in the UK still want their country to remain their country. It shows support, it shows unity, it shows that people recognize the problem. But if that energy gets funneled into the wrong politician, nothing will change. You can have the right rhetoric, the right symbolism, but if you do not actually deport people, secure the borders, reduce immigration, and restore the culture, then the symbolism means nothing. That is the lesson from Donald Trump. Trump represented something great, but he did not do enough of the things he represented. And because of that, America is still moving backward. The United States may be facing the same long-term problem as Europe. We voted in Trump in 2016. He won again later. He represented nationalism and making America great again. But from 2016 to now, what has happened? America has gained millions of immigrants, both legal and illegal. We have gone backward. Eventually, if this continues, there will not be enough of the original voting base left to elect someone who represents that same nationalist vision. That is the issue with mass immigration and demographic replacement. You can take a stand, but if the numbers keep changing every election cycle, eventually you statistically cannot vote your way out and undo the issue. And this replacement is not just about culture, it affects policy too. These groups often vote differently. They are more proportionally likely to support liberal or democratic ideologies. That means you do not lose cultural identity, you also get different laws, different social values, different crime patterns, different economic priorities, and different moral issues such as abortion. So it is not just you can live without your culture, it is you lose your culture and then you also get every political consequence that comes with that. That is why I wish the UK luck. I really do hope they can capitalize on the support. I hope the protest does not become a Trojan horse for the wrong kind of politician. The protest itself is good because it shows unity. It shows that the people of the UK still want one culture and one country. But when the time comes, they need to choose the right leader. They need someone who's actually UK first, not someone who says the right slogans while supporting Israel or refusing to fix immigration. That is what it comes down to. The protest is a symbol, it is a white pill, but the next step has to be a real political action. Overall, I think this protest is a positive thing. It shows that people in the UK still love their culture, they still want their country to remain their country, they still understand that national identity matters. Yes, Israeli flags and Zionist angle are problems. Yes, people need to be careful not to let anti-Muslim immigration turn into blind support for Israel. But the main symbol of this protest is still positive. The main symbol is keeping their culture, keeping their country, and refusing to be conquered through immigration policy. Now, they need to make sure they do not make the same mistake America made. They need to turn protest energy into real leadership, real policy, and real action. Because if they do not do that, then this will be another moment where the people stood up, said the right things, and still lost. So I do wish the UK luck. That's the video. Make sure to like, subscribe, more videos like this consistently.